On November 25, 1848, A. J. Scott opened his inaugural lecture on the academical study of vernacular literature at University College London, saying that the language of our own country is a fit subject for academical study is no longer a question. Though more often than not it seems like the beginning of English academic studies, the story actually goes at least 2 centuries back and has its roots in the reformative thought of dissenters and the self-improvement idea of Scots. While the 2 major universities were focused on the needs of elites. In the year 1662, the Act of Uniformity was passed in the Parliament of England, which required all the students and teachers to follow the oath of Anglicanism, leaving dissenters, that is to say, those who did not adhere to the established church, without a place in the major universities, and at the same time it forbade them to open the schools. Therefore, the first Dissenter Academies were held in the isolated homes, but in turn it also helped the dissenter reformers to grow independently from the scholasticism of the universities. Charles Morton was the first of those reformers who opened his academy in London, Newington Green, probably around the year 1667. Daniel Defoe, the famous author of Robinson Crusoe, was one of his students. In his book Complete Gentleman, writing about Morton says, he, Morton, teaches his students English composition on regular basis. For instance, sometimes they, students, were ministers of state, secretaries and commissioners at home, and wrote orders and instructions to the ministers abroad. From such evidence, we can confirm that modern Newington Green was one of the first academies which employed English, at least of some sort, in the curriculum. Charles Morton is usually regarded as the first generation dissenting educator. In 1689, the Toleration Act received a royal assent, which allowed the dissenters to worship. With this act, things came at a little ease for the second generation dissenting educators. They can now learn easily from each other as well as from the Scottish reformers, and now they also had several tutors specializing in subjects. Of this second generation, Philip Diddridge was an influential figure, and his academy at Northampton, which was established in 1729, became one of the most famous. English was the preferred medium of Diddridge's lecture. The second generation opened the door to the students who were not planning to become a clergyman, and a specialized curriculum of modern subjects helpful for the commercial life were designed for them. In 1758, Warrington Academy was founded, and John Aiken was appointed for the English studies, in regards of which Thomas Miller says that Aiken's English program was fuller than any offered by the English universities for almost a century. One of the Aiken students writes in the monthly repository that Aiken's lectures on Milton, Pope, Thomson, Young, and Akenside was often the most satisfactory and improving of any in the whole week. In 1761, Aiken's position was taken by Joseph Priestley, who proved to be an important figure in the development of not just English studies, but many subjects. But for now, we are particularly looking at his approach to English studies. Priestley believed that teaching English grammar is less important than teaching the students composing dialogues in English. Let them write, he says in a letter, fair copies of the English of many of their lessons and omit no opportunity of making them write in their own language. Priestley created an environment where students can express their ideas freely and where students can form their independent argument influenced by none, not even by the tutor. Priestley aimed to prepare the students for civil and active life. Works of Joseph Priestley are far greater than to be documented in a limited time. Therefore, we should end this chapter with a note that Priestley was the man who believed in the teaching of modern language, not from the perspective of grammar, but of composition, and who promoted the idea of making a free inquiry. By the 1730s, English study had emerged in Scotland. John Stevenson, who was in particular the professor of logic and metaphysics at Edinburgh, was apparently the first to teach literature, rhetoric, and composition. Though he had left not much in the form of written material, he taught two of the most influential men in the field of English studies, Hugh Blair and John Witherspoon. Hugh Blair was the chairperson of the Rhetoric and Belles Lettres at the University of Edinburgh, a position which he held till 1783. In the same year, he published a compilation of 47 lectures he had given in the university, titled Lectures on Rhetoric and Belles Lettres, which perhaps makes him the first theorist of written discourse. John Witherspoon became president of Princeton in 1768, who incorporated English studies in all 4 years of the curriculum. But it does not in any sense mean that there were no English studies in America before the presidency of Witherspoon. But before going to America, let us acknowledge that the Scots have made a substantial contribution to the development of English studies in Britain. Many of the dissenters we discussed earned a degree from Scottish universities, Priestley and Aikin from Edinburgh, Aikin's partner John Seddon from Glasgow. Professors like Hudson gave lectures completely in English, which shows the rise of vernacular in universities. In 1752, William Smith, a graduate of Aberdeen, Scotland, wrote a pamphlet, Some Thoughts on Education, with reasons for erecting a college in this province. The pamphlet came in the hands of Benjamin Franklin, who then asked Smith to come and teach at School of Philadelphia. In 1755, Smith became the provost of the same college. Frederick Rudolph, in his book American College and University, A History, writes, Smith in the classical college emphasized English literature. He further says, Provost Smith's program of studies was the first systematic course in America not deriving from the medieval tradition, nor intending to serve a religious purpose. Other professors like Francis Allison strengthened the roots of Scottish impact on English studies in America. Before English entered into universities, dissenters and Scots had made a substantial contribution to the development of English studies. The only difference between the two was that the dissenters considered English study a means of political reform and economic advancement, while the Scots viewed it as a tool of self-improvement. Now, entering into the 19th century, 1826 to be precise, the University of London opened, where men of all religions were allowed. From 1828, it started offering English. It was not in the same manner that we study English today. Rather, it used English literature as the source of linguistic examples. In 1831, English studies became part of King's College, which later became London University. An interesting thing to note here is the fact that literature was seen as the substitute for religion. The belief was that the lower class may feel that they had no stake in the country, and since their church attendance was diminishing, it was worried that they may rebel, because without religion they won't be taught morality. Therefore, literature may become a savior. In 1840, F.D. Maurice was appointed professor at King's. He believed that the middle class represents the essence of Englishness and regarded literature as something peculiar to the middle class and the expression of their values. In industrial cities like Liverpool and Birmingham, degrees were taught by external license of London University. Therefore, the subject of English at degree level spread throughout the country. The two major universities were skeptic about the value of English at the degree level. Therefore, they were the last to offer this subject, Oxford in 1894 and Cambridge in 1911. The age-old problem with literary studies is, what knowledge does it provide? It was difficult to find the proper answer to it in the 19th century, before the rise of major critical schools. Therefore, in 1894, when the course was included in Oxford, it contained heavy elements of historical language study, such as Anglo-Saxon and Middle English. In America, by the 1880s, the rhetorical approach to literary study was developing. The idea behind it was to prepare the students for the careers like that of politicians or attorneys. But the same question of the validity of literature was raised in the 1889 meeting of the Modern Language Association at Harvard, in which it was pointed out that philology, that is to say, the study of language from a historical perspective, is necessary for the academic acceptability of literature. It was only after the First World War that the rhetorical approach regained its popularity due to the rising nationalism of Americans, which in turn developed an attitude for studying national literature. A rather remarkable change occurred at Cambridge in the 1920s, with the rise of scholars like I.A. Richards, William Emerson, and F.R. Lewis, who established a firm ground for studying literature. Hence, English study that was once being taught in the isolated Dissenter Academies came a long way to become part of the major universities. But one question still remains unclear. What actually is the knowledge quotient of literature? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you like watching this type of video that deals with literature, consider subscribing to Literoseious. Thank you.